So that's a perfect segue into this conversation, because I think the thread through each of your projects and what you offered was really this idea of, first of all, first-person narratives, and really humanizing this whole conversation. And I think that's the kind of dual agenda that we have to hold in today's conversation and sort of the larger project of this summit, of going back and forth between artistic practice and community building. And so I think your presentations revealed some of the technologies of your artistic practice about how you build voice, things like values-based decision-making, long-term deep listening, understanding the emotional fabric of communities, looking at the structural changes that have to happen and how zoning, for example, impacts how a community takes shape, and making sure that you not just talk about structural change, but also the real people behind those changes. So that's great. What I would love to talk about is the other side, the community building. So if you understand the value of first-person voices, what would it take to activate this conversation at the grassroots level? At the grassroots level and the grass tops level.
I mean, I think in one aspect, it's already happening, and as that conversation relates to the grass tops conversation, I think very often there's a disconnect around engagement where there's this sort of thirst for engagement, but then nobody in your organization looks like the community that you want to engage. Mm-hmm. And there's earnest efforts to engage people, but there isn't the long-term investment in that level of engagement, right? So I think from an institutional perspective, the first thing that needs to be looked at is who makes up your organization, where are they from, what is the racial, classic, geographic diversity? Because these conversations are already happening. It's about how do we uplift them and bring them into other rooms. As you said, they don't have the power and privilege to access.
And we talked about sort of decentralizing ourselves as an institution, and again, focusing on the power that already existed. There's already mayors and self-appointed mayors and experts in your community. You don't really have to do anything except provide resources or spotlights or forums. Of course, you can bring in, sort of that particular kind of understanding in staff, but also, sort of to Rick's earlier point, you can empower the existing movement that's already rolling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kelly, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is happening, and it's a conversation that people are really interested in having. I mean, I was just amazed at the sort of outpouring of interest in the film and just wanting to talk about this. I guess for me, there's also an issue of just like, how do we create governmental structures in the city where once we get this engaged bunch of people, we can actually feed that information up. So we've had a mayor for 12 years who's looked at communities as a pain in the ass and an obstacle to change, And so he wanted to get rid of community boards, My feeling is, well, let's bring community boards back and make their votes not advisory on these planning issues. Let's make them hold on planning issues. Like, I think we need to do a lot of work now. It's two parts. It's like, yes, we need to get our act together and be talking and thinking and building our sense of priorities and so on. But then, we need, and I'm hoping that might happen, that there's a little bit more openness from city planning, for example, to hear what kinds of plans communities are putting together for themselves.
And do you have a sense, so you're talking about structural change, which is beautiful. Do you have a sense of how the average person can advocate for that kind of structural change? Like beyond just kind of, our voting power in terms of our elected officials. How do we make noise about the value of community boards? Or how do, and that's for any of you.
Yeah, I mean, using those institutions as a voice, because they have a certain sort of capital that individuals or smaller groups don't have. I mean, right before I left Weeksville, we had this conversation around having a block party, and all the signatures and things that needed to be in place were in place except for our local police. And it was partly because of their perceptions of their own community, which were pretty shocking. And they didn't see that as a sort of preventative measure. That's down to community policing not being a priority, right? As opposed to reactive policing. And so in that instance, the community quite easily can have that voice on its own, but also using different advocates and people that are there who have the same shared goal. We all want to be able to have what we need. So, you know, it's a small sort of level, but it kind of trickles up, and it's really about pushing a new kind of policy in a place that's supposedly policing you.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's about, there's an opportunity for what you might term a dual power strategy, whereas on the one hand, you're advocating and engaging with the system to be more benevolent, to be able to meet your needs, but at the same time, we also need to build alternative institutions that will eventually make the current systems irrelevant. We need both the Booker T. Washington and the W.E.B. Du Bois approach, right? And I think that's the opportunity that is up to the individual's personality of how they want to navigate the system.
So let's build on that. So I think one of the threads of the day and of your presentations is this idea of, and I think Rick said it earlier, the idea of all of our human capacity to dream the world that we want to live in, to dream about the place that we want to live and work. And I think, you know, there's a thread of that in what you're talking about. So let's just take maybe the remaining time. I'd love for you each to share your dream for the kind of Brooklyn or the kind of community that you want to live in.
Well, in full disclosure, I don't even live in Brooklyn, so it's not mine. I'm actually a Staten Islander. Yeah. And,
Claim it, own it.
so, you know, and Staten Island has its own sort of issues. So my dream for Staten Island is really to kind of end the apathy there. There's a lot of inferiority complex in Staten Island. There's a lot of Staten Islanders not knowing about Staten Island itself, so really getting a handle on the history of Staten Island and the grounding of it, and so I mean that's my dream for Staten Island.
Okay.
I do live in Brooklyn. I live in Bed-Stuy, and a serious stakeholder there. And I really, the dream is sort of to continue what I see happening with Bed-Stuy, I know Risa has experienced, but also for us to be agile. I look at organizations, new organizations like what's happening with the Contemporary in Baltimore through Dina Haggag, and people shedding, yeah, give it up, support them, but people shedding ideas around what an institution has to look like. Does it have to be a building? Is that really actually helpful? And really investing in that people power, because I've seen Bed-Stuy, it's always been wonderful. No one's coming in and fixing and making Bed-Stuy cool. It's been cool since I've been there and other communities I've lived in, okay? And so I really want to help, again, continue to spotlight that human capital that's making things go.
Beautiful.
I want to see a lot of things. A couple of those things, I think, on a personal level and something that we can all do is I want to see more empathy. I want to see people's, expand their capacity to interact with love and intention and embrace the possibility for people to recognize their own power and privilege and meet their neighbor where they're at and take the time to listen. That we don't take times to listen. There's so much assumptions. We're on the grind, we're moving, but we need to take the time and think and embrace with an open heart the people around us. I think on a structural level, one particular thing that I could plug is I'd love to see more participatory economic and political systems. One in specific is participatory budgeting. I'd love to see participatory budgeting in every corner of the city. Not with just the discretionary budgets, but with half of each city council district's budgets. I think that would be a step towards directly democratic processes that would directly benefit communities.
Nice. Kelly.
Well, I would ditto that about empathy. And I guess I would like to live in a city where people have a right to roots, to be where they are. And, also where, I'd love to live in a city where, I can move into a neighborhood and not have it be like the beginning of the end for the people who are living there and feel like everything good. I mean, I'm at the point in Sunset Park where we're getting a park on the waterfront and we go, oh no, it's going to gentrify the neighborhood. Like, a park is a good thing. So I would like to have everything. I would like to live in a place where we can get good things, and that doesn't mean that people are going to get displaced.
Steve, you got about 5 seconds.
Sorry, I took your time.
More pizza.
And I'll offer my own, which is just to say that Strange, more pizza. I dream a world where this isn't just a conversation that we're having in this lovely building on NYU's campus, but that this is a conversation that we're having on every community, corner, and that my neighbors are present, and that we're not talking about people that aren't in the room. Thank you.